Okay, we're in the home stretch with our lesson plan here. So today I'm going to talk to you about the last two sections in your lesson plan. Um, Section 5 is the materials and the resources. This includes any materials that you will be using for the students and also any resources that you will be using to support your objective or to clarify learning. So you really just need to sit down and think, what is everything I'm going to need to teach this lesson, everything the students are going to need to complete what I'm asking them to do, and anything I'm going to need to evaluate the students at the end of the lesson. Now, some of these things you may think, well, that's just common sense that kids are going to need a pencil to write with. But depending on the age of children that you're teaching and the routines that are in your classroom, something as simple as not having pencils ready for students to use can really break the flow of learning in a classroom. If you're in the middle of giving them directions and you think, oh wait, I hadn't passed out pencils, and you have to go over to your desk, get your pencils, bring them back, and pass them out, during that time, many students will have lost focus, and it breaks the flow of your instruction. So, thinking ahead about every single thing you're going to need and having all of those things organized and ready to go can really help you to be consistent in your delivery of instruction and not break the flow of learning to do things like have to go and get pencils out of the cabinet or get paper out of the cabinet. So that said, let's continue on with the same example lesson plan that we've been looking at. And it says, what instructional materials will you use, if any? And it says, I will use many materials and resources during my lesson, including Cowgirl Kate and Coco by Eric Silverman, a copy for the teacher to use, chart paper, which is the big chart paper, one flip chart for the teacher to use, and one piece of that chart paper for the students to use during their activity. And even something as simple as already having that paper torn off of the big pad can save time within your lesson. So if you know how many groups you're going to have in your lesson, you can already have that paper torn off the big chart and ready to go. Markers for student and teacher use on the charts, pencils for student use during the individual evaluation portion of the lesson, a graphic organizer for students to use during the independent evaluation, and also tape for the teacher to use to hang up the beginning, middle, and end activity. Now, if you have the big expensive chart paper that already has the sticky on the back, you wouldn't need that, or if you have magnets that you use in your room to hang things, or a corkboard strip, then you wouldn't need that. But you might need to remember, let's say if you have a corkboard strip, you would need to remember to have thumbtacks up there and ready to go. Okay, now let's look at the rationale for why these materials were chosen. It says, I have chosen these materials and resources because these materials will best facilitate student learning and understanding towards the objective. The narrative text will be used throughout the lesson, and the overall learning goal is to understand the comprehension of the book and the comprehension strategies. I will use tape to hang up the chart we created because it is important to display the students' work in the classroom for future reference. Students will need pencils, markers, graphic organizers, and chart paper in order to record their thinking, share their work with the class, and complete the independent evaluation. Okay, so that wraps up our materials section, so let's move down to our last section, which is our evaluation. Okay, what I really want you to think about when you're planning your evaluation is something that you should have already thought about, which is when you first decided what your learning goal was going to be, what your objective was going to be, what it is you wanted the students to know at the end of instruction, then you should have already begun to think, okay, I know what I want them to know. How am I going to evaluate that? How am I going to know that they have learned it at the end of the lesson? So it's very important that the evaluation that you choose, whatever it is, whatever task you're going to have them do to show you that they've mastered this objective, it has to match that objective. So when you're planning your evaluation, look back at your objective and make sure that the outcome of that evaluation is going to show you that learning you wanted them to have from that objective. Okay, so for this lesson, how and when do you plan to evaluate student learning on the content of this lesson? At the end of the lesson, I plan to evaluate student learning on the content of this lesson by having the students complete a graphic organizer to display their understanding of character, setting, problem, solution in the book. I will have the students complete an additional story elements chart independently with another text to better assess their own understanding of the story elements of a narrative text. So she has them in groups completing the chart together, and then she's also going to assess them at another time with another text just to make sure, can they transfer this information? Have they actually learned what I wanted them to learn? Can they transfer it to another text? Their finished graphic organizer will be evaluated and assessed for complete understanding after they are given an appropriate amount of time to complete the independent activity. Throughout the entire lesson, I will constantly be using formative assessment through teacher observation and questioning. I will evaluate students on their ability to work in groups, have group discussions, and how actively engaged they are in the lesson. I will use this evaluation to determine where my students stand in their ability to comprehend narrative text and on their ability to organize their thoughts in a written and organized fashion. So throughout this whole lesson, she's formatively assessing them on numerous things outside of just the story elements that her objective addressed. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to know all the types of assessment that you'll be doing during this lesson. And that's what really good teachers do. As we are facilitating students and walking around and observing them as they work in groups, we should be looking for all kinds of things, as what she has stated here. Okay, why have you chosen this approach for evaluation? I have chosen this approach for evaluation because I am able to determine whether or not my students were fully able to comprehend how to identify and understand the characters, setting, problem, and solution in a narrative text. I will be able to evaluate their ability to ask higher order thinking questions and determine if they can successfully participate in cooperative learning. By asking the students to complete the graphic organizer independently, I can better assess if they have independently comprehended the narrative text and its parts. So her evaluation leads right back to her objective, and what she has asked the students to do is reasonable for this lesson. Okay, I hope these tutorial videos have helped you better understand what needs to go in these sections of your lesson plan. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to either text me or to email me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.